Hey guys, and welcome to Film Artsy, your number one source for all things films, movies, and Marvel. My name is Elijah, and with Avengers Endgame kind of being released, just a few weeks ago and just killing it in the box office, and Spider-Man Far From Home coming up soon, the end of the Infinity Saga is kind of a bittersweet moment, and we wanted to kind of celebrate the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So today I'm going to be sitting down and rewatching every single trailer from the entire MCU. All 22 trailers that have released. It'll be most likely the first trailer that's released. For time's sake, it's already going to be 54 minutes long, which will be great. So if you want to watch along with me, I'll be reacting to all these trailers once again, and you guys will be able to kind of watch along, and we're going to talk about these movies while we do it and kind of do little mini reviews and retrospectives of all the movies as we go through it. So with that being said, first up from 2008, we're going to take a look into the very first Iron Man that started it all. I love this, just kind of jumping into this. It's so interesting that, this is the first piece of media we've seen from the MCU. The trailer, whenever people saw this in theaters, was probably the first time anything MCU related was ever seen. Wow. The transformation that Tony Stark went through in the first Iron Man was really good storytelling. This was so awesome in theaters. I saw this movie when I was 13 years old, I think. 2008, yeah. I was, I was actually 12 years old. I saw this in May when it came out. And, I remember loving it. I remember seeing it. You never thought the universe would grow as big as it did, and this movie was really, really good. Still one of my favorites in the MCU. Just the way they developed Iron Man 2 from where it was in the beginning, the suit, to where it was at the end of the film, was really cool. This trailer shows a lot of the movie. There we go. The Hot Rod Red. The color that started it all. Oh, this is awesome. Yeah. It was cool. There was a lot of, really good storytelling in this, and the action was really awesome. The CGI maybe doesn't hold up as well watching it back now, but even by 2008 standards, it wasn't that bad. It was still pretty good. Robert Downey Jr. was the perfect cast for this. No one thought that he would really have a successful career in acting again either. And in Iron Man, he just crushed it and made the whole MCU even possible. That's really cool. All right, next I think is 2008's Incredible Hulk, right? This one wasn't as well received. I remember seeing this just a month after Iron Man. And I liked it. I know a lot of people didn't like it, but I was 12. How could I not like it? There you go. He started off already having his powers in this movie, which was interesting because they were trying to make it somewhat of a sequel to 2003's Hulk while also making it a reboot in the MCU. So would you say the MCU starts in 2003? I don't think so, but I think it's interesting how they tried to kind of acknowledge that it was somewhat of a sequel with a different actor. None of these characters are there anymore except the General Ross, right? Bruce Banner's still there, but it's not the same actor. It's not Ed Norton. I don't know. I liked this movie. I don't know why so many people hated it. It's not the best MCU movie by any means. It's probably the lower tier, But if this is as bad as it gets, it was still relatively fun to watch. Look at that. Is this the creation of Abomination? Yeah. They don't really reference this issue in New York when it got destroyed by the Hulk in any of the other movies. I hope they reference it some more in the future. It is nice to an extent that they've been kind of doing that type of stuff. I can't even remember the name of the girlfriend, but she's not even referenced anymore, is she? I liked it. I liked the fact that it felt like at the end, Bruce kind of was able to take control over his alter ego in the Hulk. I didn't mind it. It wasn't as bad as people say it was. And then we got Iron Man 2, which was so hype. This is when like they really were setting up the MCU, I felt. Because we have Black Widow now introduced in this. She didn't have that big of a role, but at least they started to introduce some of these characters. We also really started, now that I think about it, to see the evolution of the Iron Man suit. Because he had the kind of portable suit that he puts on after the racing event. And then, like, when Infinity War rolled around, he had the full nano suit that just is in his chest. But it's kind of neat to see that, like, how it evolved. Tony Stark's character goes through more development here, too. It's interesting. He was so adamant that Iron Man was him and that no one should have control over Iron Man. And you kind of see this evolution in his character by like Civil War, where he's all for the Sokovia Accords. And you got War Machine. Don Cheadle's first movie, where they recasted Rhodey. I like Don Cheadle a little bit better than Terrence Howard, so it worked out pretty well. This fight scene was so cool. I love War Machine. Honestly, he was so underrated early on in the MCU, and he's finally getting some more like attention as an Avenger. But early on, like, other than this movie, I felt like he was always brushed off. He wasn't even in Avengers, unfortunately. I liked Iron Man 2. I think it played it a little safe, but it was still really good. The suit evolution was awesome too. What was next? Was that Thor? Do we got Thor? Yeah, I think this is Thor. This one introduced not only Thor, but also Hawkeye. He had a small role in this movie. Oh yeah, Jane. I wonder if they'll ever bring her back, just because they referenced her a lot in Endgame. Surprisingly. Look at those blonde eyebrows.
He said it was Thor?
I feel like his hair was really, really short back then. Didn't they really let him grow it out a little bit later on? I loved that part. That's what they always should have focused on, just like the funny interactions of Thor rather than trying to make it like over the top serious. This movie had pretty good balance with the character. I remember seeing it and actually being surprised. I thought of all of them, Thor would be one of the hardest in the MCU to pull off and make interesting. And they really did a good job with this one. Loki. This was always confusing though. I need to rewatch this movie because I don't remember much about this enemy. Did they just have this enemy for the sake of having him? I don't remember much about him. I haven't seen Thor in a very long time, so. I liked the cast in it. Heimdall. It was a good movie. Overall, through and through, I thought it was a pretty great movie. I really liked it. This makes me excited to watch it again in 3D. Back when 3D was like the biggest deal in the universe. First Captain America. This was like the game-changing part. Captain America was so good. How scrawny he was. I remember watching this trailer and just getting so hyped because it was just like a unique storytelling experience. And I knew somehow Captain America would play a role in the MCU. By now, like, after seeing like the first couple, I knew that they were doing some sort of crossover in the future. I was on Wikipedia back in the day, so I knew what was going on. But this was really interesting because they stayed true to the comics and made him a World War II soldier, and they kind of focused on telling his story before trying to shoehorn him into the MCU and into the Avengers. This is why the MCU is so successful compared to like the DCEU, where they kind of rapidly tried to make the crossover event happen rather than taking the slow time to develop each character. But like they didn't jump into like, let's make Avengers. They're like, let's tell these individual stories and then try something different later, and it paid off. That was so cool. They made Captain America, who, if you remember, guys, like back in like the pre-MCU, like Captain America wasn't like the coolest superhero. He had like a lot of like mediocre live action shows and some cartoons over the years. They made him cool in this. They made this character relatable, and just the action sequences were awesome. That's why this movie was successful. That's why people cared about this character. And it's really nice to see, even now. I wish Peggy had a little bit bigger of a role in Endgame. I assumed they wanted to, but time constraints. And here we are. This one was huge. Seeing this trailer for the first time with everybody. This movie like solidified MCU as something different than anything we'd ever seen before. Like cinema had never done like anything remotely close to this level of excellence in a crossover. And they recasted Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk, which was a good choice. They kind of acted like the Hulk movie didn't happen though. New Iron Man suit. Imagine seeing this in theaters for the first time, like the trailer. Just like this is coming out. Get hyped for this. I think like they gave... That's such a great line. Can't interrupt that. But like I think they teased it as a end credit scene in one of the movies. Like showed a little bit that there was going to be a team up. And it was so cool. And this movie, like, allowed them really to just have free reign to do whatever they wanted to do in the MCU. Like, they proved their point. May 2012. I think that was the last one distributed by Paramount, and then Disney had everything afterwards. I think Disney had some sort of a role with Avengers, though. Iron Man 3 was interesting. The MCU kind of... There was so much hype around the first Avengers, it's really hard to follow it up with anything. Similar to what happened with Endgame, I think. But I still like the story they told in Iron Man 3 and how they dealt with, like, the real effects of what happened in Avengers to Tony Stark. I guess the twist of who the real bad guy would be was kind of a deterrent from the main storytelling. Or from these trailers. I liked Iron Man 3 though. I liked all of these movies. I don't know why people have such strong opinions sometimes and said some movies are so bad. Because really I don't think there was a bad movie. Look at that. That's just some of the scene designs that they did here. You know, like the legendary like house that Tony Stark had from the first two Iron Man movies, like just being destroyed in this one was really cool. Oh, and they did the they redid the War Machine to be the Iron Patriot. I was like, it's War Machine to me. I was Team War Machine, not Iron Patriot. I love it. I want more of it. See, Rhodey, underrated character in the MCU for sure. I really like Rhodey. See, he even was early prototype of the Hulkbuster there. Is this Thor: The Dark World next, I believe? That it is. It's interesting that this movie is probably one of the weakest in the MCU. People really, really don't like it. But I feel like the directors of Endgame kind of knew where the Dark World ranks in the MCU. And they really kind of paid it some good respect in Endgame to give people a reason to care about this movie some more. And I think it helped a lot. I think the insight that Endgame gave to this movie kind of makes you look at it in a different way. And I appreciate that for sure. Because it solidifies this as a movie that was necessary on the journey to where we got in Endgame. Where it felt like with Ragnarok, they kind of retconned. They didn't retcon, but they definitely overhauled a lot of like the major storytelling plots that were solidified in the Dark World. Like all these characters and everything else. Music's pretty epic, I'll say that. They did a lot of interesting things with this movie. It just didn't bode well because it was a little bit of a complicated plot. Especially if, like, you know, living in the heels of what Avengers did, it just kind of was a little bit different. I'd like more of these movies to kind of have callbacks in later movies because I think it actually makes the rewatch value on these older films a little bit more interesting. Because I think nowadays Thor: The Dark World is going to be received and looked at much differently in the scope of what happened in Avengers Endgame. And I appreciate that. Boom. That was cool. Alrighty. Next up, is this Captain America? I I believe so. Winter Soldier? Poor Bucky. I actually did not realize ahead of time that Bucky was the Winter Soldier. And I had like paid attention to the character. I knew who Bucky was from Captain America, but I didn't catch, like, I don't know how I missed it. But so when they did the big reveal, it was a big deal for me when I saw this. This movie was also good. I mean, they really had to find a way to reinvent Steve Rogers and make him into a character in the modern time, because he was this World War II story, and they had to make a reason for him to become relevant, you know, in what year was this, 2014? So I think it worked. I think it really worked well for what they were trying to do story-wise, and I'm glad that they did it. It also introduced us to Falcon, Sam, and he was a good character too. I liked when they would introduce kind of these extra characters in the films, and I felt like they had the free reign to do it because of the success that Avengers had. And they didn't leak any of the big twists either, really, with Hydra still being around and everything that's going on with like Shield and everything. It was huge. It was a big deal back then. And this movie, good on its own, or this movie being good on its own, it's still, like, even with what happened in Endgame, it makes it much more heavy. I think it's going to have a better rewatch value, just in the scope of everything that happened. That was a great movie. 4/4/14. April release. They don't really do early April anymore. Guardians of the Galaxy. This one was such a risk. Star-Lord. Chris Pratt. What a risky casting decision, and it paid off. This movie, literally, like, no one really knew who the Guardians of the Galaxy were unless you're like a deep comic reader, and they just went ahead and did whatever they wanted to do, and they told an interesting story that was really disconnected from the MCU. And it paid off, because even though they didn't really have an appearance in Age of Ultron, which came out after Guardians, it led up to, you know, what happened in Infinity War and Endgame really well. It kept things going on in the background and on this intergalactic scale. And they took a big risk with this one, and I think it was well worth it. The soundtrack also was A+ in this movie. I don't know. I think that's why Guardians of the Galaxy is still, you know, one of the most beloved MCU movies. Especially just because during Phase 2, it kind of felt like some people were losing some interest in the MCU. You know, just because, I mean, Winter Soldier was good, but Iron Man 3 and The Dark World were questionable by some fans. I liked them, but Guardians of the Galaxy brought a lot of new people into it. There were just a lot of likable characters, and it was really lighthearted, and that was kind of one of the big things about Guardians of the Galaxy. Like it finally like was self-aware, and it didn't take itself too seriously. And so many of the movies in the MCU before that were very, very serious, and they didn't want to take, you know, kind of that more lighthearted approach. And I think that's why movies like Thor Ragnarok were able to happen, because Guardians of the Galaxy was successful, and it was really, really well done. All right, which one was next?
I'm going to show you something beautiful.
I don't remember. Is this Age of Ultron? Yeah, it was. This is an underrated Avenger movie for sure. I mean, it's hard to like. It's very hard to like say all Age of Ultron is the best Avengers movie because it's not as good as the first Avengers. It's not as good as Infinity War or Endgame, but it's still a good Marvel movie. The romantic relationship between Bruce and Black Widow might have been a little bit unexpected. I liked Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. They were introduced well and not forced. And Vision, who was kind of more of a surprise, but the Hulkbuster suit. It was still a good movie. It was just they maybe it was a little unfocused at times. Like they were trying to get a lot of moving parts to kind of get going. And maybe they didn't know the exact route on how to best pull it off. But I liked Age of Ultron. It just, the first Avengers had set the bar so high, they'd have to come up with a really good way to top it. They don't show enough of like the final battle either, which was one of the best parts of this movie. And it's often forgotten. And of course the like dinner party scene or the bar scene where they're all just kind of hanging out. It's another one of those scenes that kind of allude to some things that happen later on that we definitely have a lot of respect for. I loved Ant-Man. Ant-Man's like one of my favorites also. What was interesting was like there was so many reasons that this movie would not work. There's so many ways that they could have just made this movie bad. And they really thought about it. I remember Ant-Man being announced for Phase 1, I want to think, or it was like the first movie that was announced for Phase 2 way back, like early on in the MCU, like when it was just like Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk. And it got postponed a couple of times, but I think like they finally approached it when they had a good scope on how the MCU worked. July 17th. Yeah, I really liked this. Yeah, like, let's run with some ants. Why not? Oof. They also had the Falcon make an appearance in this movie too. The villain was really good too. I don't remember what his name was, but he was the actor from he was in House of Cards, and he was or the first season of House of Cards. And he was pretty good in that too, and I remember recognizing him as an actor, and he did a pretty good job in this movie. He made a relatively believable character. And despite them, like, you know, doing something with Ant-Man, they kept it comedic, but kept the stakes realistic. That's great. That led to some great moments. Here we go. Civil War. This was like when like the MCU snapped back. This is like the beginning of, I think this was the beginning of Phase 3, but this was like a huge turning point for what they wanted to do. This is when like the MCU's like, you know what? We can do whatever we want and we can make things bigger than ever. And they brought back General Ross. I forgot this movie introduced Black Panther. Well, I mean, I didn't forget, but like, that was a big deal. Like, it was a really, really big deal that they introduced not only Black Panther but Spider-Man in the MCU in this Captain America movie that co-starred Iron Man. It was kind of this was one of the biggest deals where they just kind of had a character from another movie that wasn't a team up Avengers movie, and they kind of just put it in with a Captain America movie, and it worked well. They had a lot of great characters in this. I'm surprised they didn't call it Avengers Civil War at that point. But part of me surprised that the other part of me feels like they also kept it very integral to the Captain America story. It felt like the natural continuation of Captain America's story. So maybe I take that back. I take that back, and I do think that it did a good job at being a Captain America movie. I was just glad that it had all these other characters in it too. That fight scene was hyped up so much. I thought someone was going to die for sure in this movie. And the biggest reveal in the MCU trailers ever. That was such a big deal. People were freaking out because Spider-Man had only been announced to have that deal with Sony very, very recently. Doctor Strange. This was an alright movie. It's not my favorite in the MCU.
This doesn't make any sense.
Not everything does. Not everything has to.
Maybe I didn't give this movie enough credit when I watched it. I don't know. The visuals were really good. I just felt like I don't know, I had a hard time relating to the character, so I just couldn't really get into it too well. But like when Infinity War rolled around, I really liked Doctor Strange as a character. So maybe I look at this one kind of differently in retrospect. I probably should give this one a rewatch also, besides the first Thor. Got Wong. I feel like this movie kind of alludes to a lot of the future of the MCU that we haven't even seen yet. Maybe this movie is just like so far ahead of its time. The visuals were fantastic though. Look at that. That's like reminds me almost of like Inception, which had great visuals too. Wow. Okay, this is added to my list of movies that need a rewatch for sure. Good. Gotta have that Wi-Fi. Here we go, Guardians of the Galaxy 2. This one was, I was so excited for. I had fun seeing this one. I think I saw this one twice actually, and it was very well worth it. The soundtracks to these are always the greatest. Ooh, I just realized Adam Warlock was hinted at in this too, and we haven't really seen him yet, have we? This movie put a lot of things into action too for the MCU, especially with kind of developing like what's going to happen with Gamora, Nebula, and Thanos, and that's a huge part of Infinity War and Endgame. And this was so good. it kept the same tone from the first Guardians too, and that was something I was concerned about. When you have a movie that does something really different, keeping kind of the same things that worked from the first one to the second one, and I think it paid off pretty well here. Maybe the third act dragged on a little bit long, but the payoff was good, or maybe the later part of the second half is what dragged on. But I appreciated it. See, even back then, they knew what they were going to do with Nebula, and Nebula has had one of the best character developments we've seen in the MCU. And they really kind of brought up the importance of the Infinity Stones, didn't they? Volume 2. The soundtracks to these are always fantastic also. Ooh. I hope in the next Guardians they explore like Peter being on Earth, because like he's kind of avoided Earth like his whole adult life, and in Endgame, as you guys know, he's there doing his thing, fighting alongside the Avengers. So I hope they at least acknowledge the fact that like Earth's something that like he's avoided, but he still fought to defeat Thanos. So oh, this was so great. This was great because it really tried to bring Spider-Man back to the idea of being this like light-hearted, like teenage kid, which was like who Spider-Man was supposed to be. And I really liked the Amazing Spider-Man movies too, but this was kind of a breath of fresh air, and it was a take in a different direction from what we had seen in other Spider-Man movies in the past. I was still a Tobey Maguire fan. I still didn't understand early on why Tobey Maguire couldn't be in the MCU, but whatever. This one, Tom Holland does a great job. I think Robert Downey Jr. was only in the movie for like collective like 8 minutes or something like that, and he killed it in the short amount of time he was in this movie. It really paid off. They really set up Spider-Man to be a character that is going to go through a really big arc, I think. Similar to Tony Stark, how he went from being a character in one place and evolved to another character, and then kind of went through another transformation even after that. I really hope that that they continue to grow Peter Parker's character. And I feel like from what we saw with the more recent Far From Home trailer, which we'll see in a little while, maybe that is what they're doing. And but this movie was good, especially with Sony at the helm of it still. It looks like they did a decent job. They played it pretty safe, and they kind of followed the MCU Marvel formula, and it paid off. Better than Venom. Thor Ragnarok. This was so good. This is my favorite Thor movie, easily, because they just really refocused how they were going to develop this character and use this character and utilize him. And they just like stopped taking things so seriously. And it paid off. Like, they made it fun again. We got Bruce back. We got the Hulk. Thor. They wrote off some of the characters that weren't that important in kind of a cheap shot way in some cases, but you know what? They weren't that important. They got Valkyrie up in there. We got Korg and Meek. I don't know. They made this character so much fun. And they kind of kicked off Thor on this new story arc that started here it kind of grew through Infinity War and progressed through Endgame, and I don't think we're even at the conclusion of where Thor is going on his next journey. I feel like this is the first time that Thor's actually gotten to go on a like serious character development, and I appreciate that, and I hope that we get to see more of where this goes, because obviously he went through this really bad depression after Endgame, rightfully so, as a lot of the characters did, and a lot of the characters were affected in a certain way, and I hope that they continue to grow this character, and I hope that when they revisit Thor, whether that's in another Guardians movie or they give him his own movie, I hope that they develop this character some more. I'm down for as Guardians of the Galaxy if they'd made that a movie. Either way, I just thought this was cool. And they had changed the trailer to throw us all off because technically he only had one eye there. Raging fire versus smoldering fire. I love it. What's next? Ooh, Black Panther. See, this movie did extremely well, if I remember, in the box office. And I think it did so well because of the fact that people recognized the character from Civil War. Them kind of introducing the characters ahead of time paid off in its own way. Not to take away from what Black Panther did on its own, but I think it helped give Black Panther the platform to like really be appreciated in the critical sense. And besides just what this movie did culturally, it also was just a good movie on its own. I loved it. I hope they do more with him in the larger sense besides just being the character, because I feel like he didn't get a very good role in either of the Avengers movies that he's in, and I feel like he probably deserves a better role in those movies. But if you think about it, like, what did he really get to do in Infinity War or Endgame? Like, this is so amazing. So my complaints aren't necessarily from what his character was in those movies, but I want to see more of this character because this was so cool. And they made a sympathetic villain that you could kind of believe. I don't know. I love it when like a villain's not just a villain for the sake of being bad, but is has some intentions behind it, and you can kind of like at least understand why. Kind of like Thanos from Infinity War. I appreciate that. And they just had a great cast of characters here, and the storytelling was really unique. Look at that. Who would have thought we would be getting a Black Panther movie? When did this come out? 2017? Besides, like, when they announced it. But who would have thought it would come out as good as it did? Here we go. Infinity War. The feels on this. The feels. This one gives me chills still, just because it was so cool. That anthem that goes to the Avengers. Oh, I love it. Do you guys remember like when this trailer dropped and like everyone was just speculating as to what was happening and like where the plot was going and what was going to end up, and it literally like just shocked us when this movie did drop. And they had a lot of misdirections in the trailers too. Wow. You got good old Spider-Man in his iron suit. We got Thor. And Captain America's back. First time in, what was it, 2 years? It was great. And then we had the group that was kind of in the outer space battles. I liked how they kind of split people up in this first act of, I guess, what would be Infinity War and Endgame. Because it let this movie be great in its own way. And just really be excellent. I still think, personally, Endgame topped it. Yeah, look at Hulk there. He wasn't there. I think Endgame still topped this one. It was very, very close. But, man, did this movie set the bar high. How is any other superhero franchise going to be able to even compete? Just how they dropped the Guardians in there at the end of the trailer, which was their first Avengers movie, which we talked about earlier. I liked this movie too. I felt like Ant-Man and the Wasp wasn't as good as the first Ant-Man, but it was definitely pretty self-aware and it had a good time. It was a good summer movie to watch, especially after what happened in Infinity War. We needed something kind of like chill to to make us you know. Forgot about Ghost. I wonder if Ghost is gonna play a big role in the future of the MCU. I wonder if they would never make a Ghost standalone movie, just because that character should be fleshed out a little bit more. There was a lot of funny moments in this. They tried to, develop Hope as this new super character. I feel like her character hasn't grown enough or developed enough to a really good spot yet. I think this character still has some places to go. But this movie was great. The tie-in it had to Infinity War at the end was amazing. But as far as storytelling was concerned on its own, it did a lot. It brought us to where we were in Endgame for sure. But it wasn't necessarily like the most mind-blowing movie either. It's definitely fun. If you haven't seen Ant-Man and the Wasp yet, you definitely should watch it because you'll have a good time with it. I know a lot of people don't really watch the Ant-Man movies though. Oh, I love it. "65 feet. That was a pretty great movie. That's like, am I bad at reactions at this point where I'm just like, it's a good movie. It was a pretty good movie. Yep, that one was good too. Boom. I love Captain Marvel. Just like all the other movies. This movie I was really hyped about, and it was pretty good. I want to see more of Carol Danvers. I understand why they didn't, put her on the forefront of Endgame like everyone thought they were going to do. But when they did put her in there, it was pretty hype. I felt like the trailer didn't do this movie justice. Maybe this is the worst Marvel trailer out of all of them, because the movie ended up being a lot better than the trailer. The only one that might not be as good is the first Far From Home trailer. The second Far From Home trailer, A+. But the first one, they were trying to hide so many spoilers that are kind of integral to what's going on in that movie. But even then, despite the fact the trailer for this movie wasn't that good, It did extremely well in the box office. It did extremely well in reviews, and that's what really matters. This movie was a great movie. I don't know. The trailer just didn't do it justice for how good the movie ended up being. It's still pretty good. Goose. I love Goose. Do you think we'll ever see Goose again in the universe? Guys, if you've watched this far into this episode, leave a comment. Say that Goose is great in the comments if you've watched along with me for the 50 plus minutes we've been doing this. I really appreciate you guys chilling with me. We're at Endgame now. This one's one of the more recent ones. The feels on this, especially seeing the clips with Tony Stark. Ugh. The feels on this. Remember how everyone was like speculating how like the trailer, or that the intro of this trailer would be like a major plot point with Tony, and really it just was this minor situation and got resolved pretty quickly. But they didn't have to over reveal stuff in the trailer, so I appreciate that too. Thanos did exactly what he said he was gonna do, and then he became a little farmer on his little planet. And we got Thor. Ronan. That Ronan reveal was so everyone knew like he was gonna be Ronan, but just the way that they like introduced him, that fight scene right there before that was so cool. This is my first time watching the trailer since seeing Endgame. And I've seen Endgame twice. So good. I started to predict around when they showed the Peggy Carter on the watch that they would bring her back in some way or do some sort of closure with that plot line. If you notice, Scarlett Johansson's character, Black Widow, had short hair there, even though we know that happens 5 years in the future. And this is the only trailer we haven't seen yet, or for a movie we haven't seen yet. Yeah, Happy flirting with Peter's aunt. See, this trailer aired before Peter was resurrected in Endgame. So they kind of had to hide the fact that that this movie could didn't take place before Infinity War. That's why they didn't put any dates or anything on the passports. I'm glad they kind of waited a little bit before developing the love interest between Peter and MJ. I think it's gonna make it have a little bit more value in these later movies. There we go. Man, Nick Fury's been in every movie that's released this year, if you think about it. All three of them. He has a small role in Endgame, but he was there. His new suit is interesting. I haven't really talked about it or looked really into the fact that his suit is quite different. Look at that. And we got Mysterio. I really am curious what they're going to do with Mysterio because he's an interesting character. He's sneaky. He's going to be up to something, I know that. I don't trust him, but I don't know what it's going to be. I love that. Oh, sure. Guys, that's it. We made it through every single MCU movie. All 22 films, or 23 films technically, right? What did you guys think? If you guys bared with us this whole time, I appreciate you just for watching through this. It's been a lot of fun. The MCU's been great so far. The Infinity Saga, what a trip. The last 11 years. It's crazy to think about. But with that being said, guys, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and turn notifications on. Leave a like and maybe a comment with what your favorite Marvel movie is. Just say, my favorite Marvel movie is ... and answer. Really curious to see what you guys think. If I had to pick one, I mean, how can you beat out Endgame? I really enjoyed Endgame. It just felt like the perfect payoff. If I had to pick a non-MCU movie, I liked Iron Man 2 a lot. I really like the first Captain America movie. I don't know. So let us know what you guys think, and we'll see you guys all next time with a brand new video. Bye, guys.
What's up, Dorito?
Then, better late than never, Captain America, Chris Evans, crashes the interview. Hugs all around, but hey, where's Roxy?
I'm sorry.
Chris Evans.
You two are.
Hi.
You both are relevant. Great.
Okay. This interview actually ended 2 minutes ago. We just.
Kyle, enjoy this Team Iron wannabe man, but the right team is the only team, Cap.
No negativity from me.
Are you a baby?
Oh, wow.
Are you Avery? You're a pretty girl. Yes. Are you happy?
Hey guys, we hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, make sure you guys hit the like button down below and subscribe for more Film Artsy. If you guys want to showcase your talent to the world, Film Artsy is the best place for you guys to do it. Please submit your videos to filmartsyofficial@gmail.com, or you guys can click the link in the description. We really want to see what kind of talent you guys can provide. So let us know, send us an email, and we'll check out your videos, and we'll see you all in the next video.